Welcome, BBCers, to episode number 216 of the Broken by Concept podcast, the number one solo queue educational and motivational podcast. Curtis, today we're going to be starting off with a dev article from Riot Games about the Split 3 gameplay changes. Moving into this year, they changed it from 2 rank splits from last year to now 3 rank splits. We're ending Split 2. So if you're getting in your last rank for your rewards, and we're going to be starting Split 3. And Riot have given us a bunch of major changes that they're going to be making. So we'll have this linked in our YouTube description if you're a Spotify listener. So we're just going to cover sort of the points that we think that are more important we're going to focus on. So the first bit here. So champion emphasis, combat pacing, and snowballing. Here we go. Let's start with the biggest change you'll notice going into this split, the global item nerfs. Simply put, we're removing 5 to 15% stat efficiency from almost every legendary item in the game. Those changes get us several important benefits, slowing down combat pacing, reducing snowballing, and making champions themselves take up a larger portion of the power budget. Most players queue up for a game of League because they want to play a champion. We don't see anyone load into the game and get excited to play Infinity Edge. They want to play Jinx or Yasuo. With this in mind, you can think of this change as a durability update 2.0 in the sense that we want more time for players to play out their champions' gameplay fantasy and to put more emphasis on champions than items. So let's just start there, Curtis. Really interesting. I'm trying to think, the first thing that I read this, Curtis, I was like, item spikes are a huge part of, I say in my reviews all the time, I'm sure you do as well. You know, it's a lot of it's just sort of getting to the next item spike. Am I a champion that spikes at 1 item, 3 items? Many champs in the game, you know, like they're 3 items. Some champs are 2 items. Would I just not be saying that much anymore? And I was thinking of exploring that world, that universe. That's really, I think that's cool. I like that. If items were not as important. Now, these numbers, 5, 10, 15%, sounds like they're probably still going to be. It's not like it's like a 50% nerf or something. But I thought that was an interesting thought experiment, interesting world to think.
Yeah. I mean, look, I guess when I listen to this, you know, I like it. You know, I guess games being a little less snowballing and everyone having a little bit more durability and the games, I guess, slowing down in pace. I guess that makes sense. I think maybe you're right. Maybe the games will revolve a little bit less around items. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be exactly the same. It's like, a Yasuo, Yone needs to get to Bork, or an Echo needs to get to, Lichbane Nashers, or whatever the hell it is, right? I don't know. What's interesting with a lot of these changes, though, Nathan, you know, we preach adaptability.
Absolutely.
Right? We preach next patch, you got to adapt. This is the way the game is played now. How do you increase the likelihood of winning your very next League of Legends game? I feel as though it's very difficult to balance having this like adaptable mindset while also being very critical of what the changes are. You know, it's almost... we've been doing this podcast for quite a while, Nathan, and one of our big philosophies in the BBC and also in our programs has been just roll with the punches. You know, whatever Riot brings out, whether it's 2 splits, 3 splits, whether it's grubs, no grubs, rifts being highly valuable or not very valuable, or, you know, tier 2 towers being worth a lot of gold or not much gold, or items being very powerful, or whatever the hell it is. Our kind of approach has always been like, just accept it, go with it, roll with the punches, and find a way to win the game. What's the best way to win the game? And so when these changes happen, I actually feel I struggle because I kind of feel like it's just like, all right, it's just going to be another patch, and I just adapt to it.
What
I mean?
This is, at the end of the day, this is just a normal day at the office.
That's
basically
kind of how I feel, and I don't know. If
are you saying that the community, people like, so this is the next big change that's going to change everything? Is that what people are hoping for? But you're just like, this is just another day at the office.
I don't know, Nathan. I feel as though this is my kind of conspiracy theory here, right? Putting on my conspiracy theory cap.
Here we go.
I think Riot Games have kind of intuitively realized that the more changes they can pump out, the more fresh the game will feel. And so what's happened is that they've actually been incentivized, or like some, maybe it was from the higher ups, whereby maybe their grand plan was to have 3 splits to give an excuse to have major changes put into the game.
They're just doing changes for the sake of changes.
For the sake of change.
And they know that it doesn't really change things that much in terms of, but it's the feel of change.
The feel of change. That's my point. My point at this stage is thinking about how many changes we've had.
Yeah.
We've had like grubs getting introduced, and then...
The funny thing is, I was watching an interview with, there was an interview with Blabber, and they were talking about the way that the game's played now around mid specifically, how the bushes are like longer and it's like harder to gank mid, and that's like the theory, but he said he didn't feel that at all. And he said he can't even remember what the game was like last year. I don't remember what the game was like without grubs or dragon, but when that changed, everyone's like, whoa, the whole game's changed, but I don't know what League is without them now. So the player base it sort of adapts and forgets.
It adapts and forgets, and you kind of morph your view of the game, and you kind of just like, because in League, in order to climb, you have to play a lot of the game. You build muscle memory on the new patch very quickly.
That's a baseline of the player base. There's just so many games being played. It's so accessible compared to playing, going to the soccer field and like getting to mates together and playing. You can play games so quick, so everyone actually adapts to the changes automatically.
Yeah.
Really quickly.
Very, very quickly. And so like when I hear this, it's kind of like, oh, just another change that is going to come out. And I'm not saying this in a negative light. I'm just saying...
Yeah, it sounds like you're sort of saying like, I'm just numb to changes at this point.
Yeah, it's kind of like, I'm not... It's like, okay, cool. What does this mean? And whether it's more durability, less durability, games are faster paced, slower paced. It's like, I feel as though this is... I guess let me articulate it in a bit of a different way. There are so many changes. We have like fortnightly patches, essentially, something like that.
We probably read these dev articles once every 3 months.
We have one of these pretty big changes. Yeah. We've had many these big changes all throughout the year. It almost feels like in order to be a modern day League player, you need to have the skill set of this, you need to have this very adaptable mindset and not hold on to like whatever play style you had or whatever idea of, the way you win games with your champ. You need to always is next, but also simultaneously be attuned to these changes and kind of like you're incentivized, I guess, to have an opinion because like the community kind of demands an opinion from you. And it's almost like Riot is like, we want to hear from you.
They're forcing talking points.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it. And
They're forcing a discussion.
It's like, you have to be involved in this discussion. We want to hear from you. And what do you think? And it's so full on.
It is.
It's very, very full on.
Especially as like sort of public figureheads or us in our programs, we're going to get the questions. Like they're just inevitable. And we're expected from our community to answer them.
Yeah, exactly right. And so like, when the patch dropped, all my Discord was just popping with, oh my God, what's going to happen? Curtis, I'd love to get your take on the meta. And oh my Lichbane is this, Bill Parther and, this and this. And I'm like, well, I don't know. I genuinely don't know. And the reason I don't know is because so many things are changing so quickly in this next patch in Split 3. All these items are getting adjusted, right? So you can't... Remember, the power of a particular item is relative to whatever's in the game at the time. So if Lichbane is getting a nerf, and this is getting a nerf, and that's getting adjusted, and all these things are getting adjusted at the same time, well, then it's hard to know how strong or weak something feels because it's all relative, right? Like if an individual item gets nerfed now, let's say randomly on patch 14.14 or whatever it is, well, it's a lot easier to gauge what that's going to mean for the meta, right? Because
it's like we just don't build this anymore, or we just build another.
Well,
item.
Everything else stays the same. If everything else is static and one variable,
but all these changes come in at once.
It's
so
like
no one can predict, really, right?
No one can predict.
A really good question, and posing to your community, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts. Being the mid lane, the whole ADC thing, the Smolder, Tristana, all that. Did you predict it? Did people predict it, or we just adapt to what the top players are doing?
I think AJ was telling me about this the other day about how people were very slow to cotton on to Smolder mid.
Yeah,
people were very Smolder mid was strong for a long time, and people didn't cotton on for it for a long time. The champion was literally broken by concept, and it didn't get picked up on for quite a long time. And then eventually some pros started playing it, and they weren't even going grasp. They were going other keystones. And then people slowly realized that grasp was actually quite good. And then now it's obviously getting nerfed to the ground and mid, but it took a long time for people to realize. And I think with the frequency of changes, certain things just go under the radar, or they take so long for people to figure out that it's actually strong that multiple patch cycles will go through without people realizing that this shit gets through.
Is this bad to say
maybe
that...
Riot want that.
Is this bad to say that the general player base shouldn't really be putting that much emphasis on these, because they're, at the end of the day, you're probably not going to be the one that figures out the Zeri mid, the small to mid, Tristana. You're just going to be adapting. So why put your focus, your energy onto it? You're sort of just going to be, you're not going to be that one. The odds of you being that one and being at such a high level than the pros, the coaches, that sort of stuff, analyzing things, you're probably not going to be that person. So why just adapt, roll with the punches. Yeah, roll with the punches. Yeah. I mean, when was the last time, I just adapt. Like, I've never really come up with anything. Like, I did my whole Udia thing back in
when was the
season
last time you were ahead of the meta, you feel like? Have you ever been, if you feel like you've ever been
I would say I've never been ahead of the meta. I've always been behind. Always. My rank journey's always been more difficult than overall. But I obviously had got some buffs, like, the whole Rek'Sai. When Rek'Sai, I was already a Rek'Sai player, so I just got lucky at that time. Was it last year when I got Challenger up with Rek'Sai? My champ pool, every time I've been Challenger, has just been hard mode stuff, Jarvan, Volibear, Zinzao, just sort of the staple junglers that have been around for a long time. I just min-max just beautiful League of Legends, beautiful jungling. And even back in my, when I got ranked 2, 3 accounts top 10, my whole, tank, I'll build tank on Eve back in the day and all that sort of stuff. And my Udia tank build, and everyone was playing the Trick 2G stuff. That wasn't meta. That I just made that work. That was just my play style. But no one could do what I did because I just was so good at that. And you could get away with that in season 3 as well. So I would say personally, never. I've never been ahead of the meta intentionally. And if I was, it was by luck.
Right place, right time.
Right place, right time.
There's only one, off the top of my head, I think for me right now, there's one that quite recently, I was ahead of the meta with Brand. I knew Brand this was before Brand became popularized. I knew Brand was strong purely because, again, I followed my rule of thumb. If something was annoying to deal with in solo queue.
Yeah.
There was a Brand mid player in OS. And I played it. I'm like, this shit is annoying. And then I started playing it. No one was playing it at the time. And I was telling everyone, guys, play Brand, play Brand, play Brand. And then it's slowly cottoned on. That was actually in a recent time. But before that, probably not for a long time. But now, because this whole article, right? We've got this whole article talking about durability, more increased durability.
Should we go over more of it before we?
Let's go more a little bit longer on this, and then I want to kind of tie it back to a bigger discussion, Nathan. So let's go a little bit deeper on the article.
I want to keep just reading this paragraph because I think this is interesting, right? Because I just want to get into the mindset of Riot, how they're viewing the game and players' skill level and stuff. So it continues on to say here, players have significantly improved at League over the past 15 years and generally speaking, really like it when they're able to use those skills to beat their opponents. We're pretty big fans of skill mattering too. That said, we should explain why nerfing almost every item in the game is related to that. League had found itself in a state where the amount of power champions earned from items rapidly outpaced other sources like experience or team-wide objectives like Dragon. I've definitely felt this in recent times. As a jungler, probably as well, Curtis, I don't get that many resources. I feel when I could be hitting my abilities and Smolder's just killing everyone.
Right.
The 3 item spike, has kicked in, and it doesn't matter sort of what I do at that point. Where was I? While we hadn't directly increased the amount of gold in the game that much over the years, in fact, we've taken it away from things like dragons. The whole player base got a lot better at things like last hitting minions and also staying alive in order to last hit those minions. So it sounds like people are better at not dying. People just getting more gold.
High econ.
But the people are getting more gold because they're better at the game. Yep. Compared to, they're actually
better resets, better wave management, better farming, all that.
And these things are massive to getting gold. Resetting. Tempo. And also denying gold from the enemy as well. So you prevent them getting their items so you can get your items, way before they can get theirs. That's another part of the skill as well. freeze in waves and dive in and all that such. If you want to feel really skilled, look at old Worlds matches and compare your farm from the World's Best from 13 years ago. In the final game of 2012 World Finals, the ADCs had 133 and 165 minion kills at 20 minutes. They were both on one completed legendary item and weren't remotely close to their second. Nowadays, that's below average for Platinum players, let alone the World's Best. But why is this a problem? Well, accelerating gold incomes makes combat faster because for most champions, items provide a lot more damage than they provide durability. One of the most interesting results from the durability update was that players reported significant improvements in matchmaking quality, which was extremely impressive because we didn't even touch matchmaking. We just slowed down combat enough that actions were more readable and your full set of skills mattered more than your reflexes. So in the interest of making combat more readable, lowering the amount of snowballing in the game and overall making the game more fun to play, we've taken 5 to 15% of stat efficiency off of almost every legendary item in the game. The recurring goal for these changes was to slow down the pace of fights. Champions should move more slowly to reward proper positioning, have more downtime between actions so each one matters more, and only have access to significant burst damage if their champion is built around bursting their opponents. So now it goes on to break it down by class. Do we want to go into this, Curtis?
I don't think this really matters too much.
If you want to again read the article, it'll be in the link. So
I think that's
it basically just goes over like how it's going to affect, AP champs and examples, fighters, skirmishers, tank items, AD assassins, enchanters.
It's like TLDR is like a lot less damage, but tank items is kind of staying the same. Like they're getting adjusted less. And basically as well, they're separating out the stats, Nathan. So for example, if you want to buy an item that has, this is kind of what they said at the start of the year. If you want kind of ability power, you're not going to get additional haste as well. They're separating out the utility versus the damage.
There's trade-offs.
Exactly. Which I do like. I do like that. That actually, for me, I've always been a fan of that philosophy where it's like you need to feel, I like it when you feel punished for buying an item and you're not getting everything.
Yeah. Before it was so obvious the
so
cookie
easy.
cutter items because they just gave you.
They gave everything. Like remember all the items back in the day would give you like mana, haste,
like Black Cleaver was just stuff like that, just haste, HP, damage.
Yeah, and now you do feel it where it's like you have to make a choice. How am I going to get my mana? How am I going to get my pen? How am I going to get my HP? You do actively have to think about that. And I have felt that now, but if that's even going to be even more so the case, I like that. I think that's a thumbs up. I think it makes more sense for the game of League.
More diversity in builds.
Diversity in builds, but also intentionality. It requires intentionality with your builds. So, look, I think this all sounds great, right? I mean, I do like... look, I do like being rewarded for better quality decision making and not necessarily... I mean, look, okay, let's play devil's advocate here then. Okay, there's two sides of the story here, right? So you got number one, people thinking, yay, less time getting bursted, slower game pace. I can take time to make my decisions. Maybe it's a little bit more forgiving. I'm not going to get randomly one shot if I miss position, et cetera, et cetera. The other side, right, of the fence might be saying, oh, isn't this going to make the games harder to snowball? Again, I'm going to get less rewarded for better quality, being faster, being quicker. You know what I mean? Like there's some people that are going to be on the side of, oh, this sucks. I feel like I can't push my lead as much, or if I can't gap my opponent as much. Other people are going to be, feeling probably a little bit better about this. This is how I feel with a lot of these changes nowadays, Nathan. I get it. And then this is where my confusion lies. How much of these changes are coming from objectively reading the state of the game and listening to the community, and how many of these changes are just changes for the sake of change? Now, I don't think both of them are necessarily negative, right? I do think change for the sake of change is also kind of good to keep the game fresh. But I think as a ratio, what would that look like based off, what we're seeing here today? Because if you remember correctly, right? If I remember off the top of my head, didn't we go through a phase not that long ago where they wanted to add damage and burst because they felt as though there wasn't enough assassins?
They did overkill on the durability patch.
Yeah, didn't they?
They admitted that, yeah.
They overkilled on the durability patch and then went the other way. And it feels like we're now in this pendulum where it's like we're going...
They know what they're doing. It's like, okay, we're going to do this. They know what it's going to be like. And then the community's going to have this reaction. And then we're going to go... And then we're going to read an article 6 months from now. It's like, we felt like that the games were too slow, so we're going to add more damage.
That's my point. Like, look, I could be completely wrong here. I
Yeah.
don't know. I'm just going to raise the question. And look, what I'm trying to do here is really engage in some critical thinking.
Yeah.
Sometimes it feels like I'm just a puppet being like, oh, here's another article from Riot saying we're increasing durability and reducing burst. And then 6 months later, we have another one where we're decreasing durability and increasing burst because everyone's building shields and tank items and we're getting death bowl comps and everyone's, A-ramming on neutral objectives now. And then it's just going to be the other way. And so I don't know.
Or maybe, Curtis, they're close. Maybe they've had to do a couple of stuff ups. Because remember, even though League has been around, for what is it, 12, 10, 12, 13, 14, I always forget the number, 15 years, 10 years, I always forget the number. Let's say just over the last 6 years, maybe the balance team started to sort of methodically like get their stride and they needed more years of data and they needed to stuff up themselves in the balance team. You got people like, Freak and Froxon and stuff. They would have had to learn on the job. They don't have people to copy from, right? Like balancing, doing a patch every two weeks. That's new in gaming.
Well, maybe this is just it. Maybe this is the only way to have a balanced, fresh MOBA is where you have these like kind of like smaller patches, right? Every 3 weeks, which, you're slowly adding, altering items slightly, altering timers of certain things, objective things, maybe getting slightly adjusted. You have these like minor adjustments. And then as these minor adjustments play out over time, the wider player base, experiments with these patches. They figure it out. And it's kind of like this iterative process where the player base, I guess, tests these changes, right? Then assess these changes. Then you make these larger overarching changes. And then it's just a rinse repeat. You have small changes, boom, big change. It's just like an iterative process. Maybe this is just the way it has to be. Because if you didn't do this, what's the alternative? The alternative would be, okay, we're just stuck with this specific way of playing the game. And then it becomes boring. It becomes stale. Yeah, the game gets sold.
When we did the episode with Froxon, he did say that, the player base thinks you can't balance.
Can't balance it. You don't want to balance.
You don't want a fully balanced game. That's not fun, actually. Yeah. So like my theory, there could be a theory where Riot just need like 3-4 more years. And then suddenly there's no more big changes. It's just little changes. Maybe they're just doing champion stuff here and there and just cycling through some metas. But maybe they're going to work out this balance between like item strength and champions. And because I do like the beginning sentence where that is what League is at its essence. People love the champions. People don't go around saying, Black Cleaver or the new Maligants, like these items come and go. Like people don't like have Maligants like tattooed on them, like but people will get like a like a tattoo of their champion or whatever, right? Totally.
Now this ties into a broader discussion, Nathan, about we've been very vocal in this podcast in the past about people overemphasizing patches and changes, right? Where it's like people are rushing to figure out the meta. Find that cheesy pick, whether it's the W Max Vlad or whatever XYZ overpowered pick is, and then go to the next gimmick. We've always been very critical of people kind of overly over adjusting to the meta, right?
Especially coming from the general solo queue player base, that it's like if they want to get results in their gameplay, putting your attention and focus in these areas we've found with our clients is not helpful if that's your goal.
Exactly right. But the question I want to raise, Nathan, what changes should people be considering? What is, because we're kind of roughly touching on this before, like the modern day toolkit of a League of Legends player, given the frequency of the changes, you need to be, in my opinion, one of the skills that you need to develop is being able to read a patch, be able to determine what is noise, what do I look over and be like, nah, that's not really that important. I get it, but that's not really going to change my gameplay. That's not really going to alter my journey. And this other thing is going to be like, oh, wow, okay, I actually need to really have a think about that. That's actually potentially going to have an impact on how I play my lane phase in the next game, or how I jungle path, or how I literally play in my next 3 block. What advice, or what really comes to mind for you, Nathan, in terms of like this skill of reading a patch and adjusting to a patch, if at all?
Okay, let's think about how many... Okay, so is this statement true, Curtis? Patches, most of the time, like the 1%ers, can be... There is the bigger patch changes that maybe 5-10%ers in their gameplay. The higher rank you go, the more these 1%ers, the more the changes affect you as a player. Would you agree with that statement?
I would agree with that.
If you know you're iron, bronze, silver, gold, you're making so many 20%ers in your gameplay that putting the effort, the attention onto patch notes is not going to change the results of your gameplay.
So you could literally not even open up patch notes below platinum, and it wouldn't probably make barely any difference in your gameplay. Right?
Just hear what people are saying, feel in your games, and look at some things here and there, but not. There's no contributing to the conversation. Right. There's no even thinking about coming up with something else. At the end of the day, the best tips, you're probably getting caught. You're probably doing really bad resets. Like, these things aren't really going to affect you that much. So the higher rank you go, we're happy with that statement.
I think that's fair to say.
The more the patches overall are going to impact you. And that's not to say that you shouldn't be adapting at all in silver or whatever.
It's on a scale.
It's on a scale, right? And as there is going to be the biggest, for example, I'm reading here, Return of Lethal Tempo. It's like, okay, well, the Lethal Tempo was removed in the last couple of months. It's going to come back. You're a Master Yi player in silver, probably pick up Lethal Tempo again, right? It's going to affect you. But these are rare. These are rare sort of things, coming up a whole room. But most of the time, patches, 1%ers. Now, you talk about from the jungler's perspective. From matchups, Curtis, how often have the way you play a matchup, levels 1 to 6, 1 to 5, changed based on patches?
Very rare.
So you could have gone back 6 years ago, and let's say if you had principles of how do I lane versus Yasuo versus Victor, Yasuo versus Orianna versus Talon mid, you could probably still go back 6 years ago and be like, yep, that still applies today.
It's basically identical.
Yeah.
I literally had this conversation with someone recently about how the matchup hypothesis at a baseline level strategy, how you played these matchups at a high level is basically the exact same. It doesn't really change that much.
Yeah. Same for jungle pathing, right? The champion Nautilus is a champion that has very clear identity. He's going to probably be hooking Thresh, Pike. And then if it's against another class like a Nami or a Lulu or whatever, I know how that dynamic is going to play out regardless of patch. That hasn't changed.
For the most part, yes.
Forever, basically. So if that's true, then... you question how important are all these things that are coming at us, flying at us 24/7?
That's a very good question. I think with these patches, Nathan, there are kind of I like to kind of think of them in tiers. You have these very minor
tiers there.
Let's just call them tier 3 changes.
It's 1%ers, 5%ers, and 10%ers.
Yeah, exactly right. And so 1%ers are kind of the small number changes. So it's
Aurelion Soul's E does... It's level
5 more damage or whatever,
yeah,
right? So for the average player, that's going to have little to no bearing over how they're going to play their matchup practically, what their mindset is going to be in the matchup, when they spike, when they trough.
We're probably talking about till diamond at that point. These changes.
Very, exactly. Not to say that it won't have an effect in their journey at all, but in terms of very practically what you can do, it's not much. It's 1% of stuff, right? But then I'll say there's a one above that. Let's call it a 5%. I'll give you an example. Aurelion Soul got there was a Q change that was pretty significant where you could Q tap on a Soul before and it wouldn't really cost barely any mana. But then they changed it where casting Q a lot in lane would cost you a lot of mana. Now that actually had a massive change on a Soul's early lane because you couldn't really harass people as much without just going in the earlier stages. And that prevented a Soul from being able to stand your ground in a lot of matchups. That actually did have a pretty significant impact on the way a Soul navigated lanes. So people may have interpreted that as a 1%er, but it wasn't a 1%er. That would actually change pretty significantly how a lot of your lanes are going to go, to the point where you might be able to bully certain lanes and maybe not anymore. Okay, so there's like a level. So let's say we have 1% as being like the small little stat changes that really have no bearing on how a matchup changes. You have one that's like a level above that, which is pretty significant. It's like an ability centric alteration that literally changes the way the champ functions. So there's that, right? Then you have like, I guess, a whole nother subcategory of changes, which is kind of like, I mean, I'll say this is in the same percentages, in the same vein, runes and items. Certain rune changes, they're not really going to make that much of a difference, right? You'll have very slight adjustments about what a rune will or won't do. Biscuits give this amount of mana or that amount of mana, or like very, very small adjustments, or fleet gives you a little bit less healing or whatever the hell it might be. Versus they completely gutted fleet, or like, you know, or absorb life. Sorry, absorb life was like really, really strong as a rune, and then it became completely useless. That would have had a noticeable impact on your gameplay if you took absorb life before it got nerfed when it was really strong versus not taking it. That would actually have a pretty significant impact on your gameplay.
Makes sense,
right? So those changes actually do matter. Same thing with itemization, right? Now,
for examples like that for jungle, the big ones would be like the 10%ers in my eyes. Like Wukong was a good example. They nerfed all these damage. His clear just got brutalized. Like Riot are good at brutalizing certain champions' clears, and then they become really difficult to navigate.
Exactly right.
The jungle, the early game, clearing your camps.
So for the average player, it is actually very difficult to distinguish between it can be very difficult to distinguish between a 1%er and a 5%er. It actually can. Mm-hmm. And so I was coming into this conversation. I'm kind of learning as this conversation goes on. You know, I wanted to talk about, is it even possible for the average player to create a toolkit to be able to read a patch? It's actually hard, even just talking through it with you right now. How does a player who's, you know, in gold look at a patch note of ASOL and be like, how does this mana actually change how my lane is going to go versus how does this, you know what I mean? Like small changes, like you just said with Wukong, the average Wukong player may look at, the damage is increased a little bit less on this and this. Are they really going to be like, that's going to completely change my clear and that's going to have this flow-on effect in my gameplay? Probably not. That's not exactly overly intuitive.
They might not how it actually impacts, but I think that a very baseline, what people see, they go and open a patch note, they see the buff, the little green arrow and the red arrow, and they see a bunch of text, they actually would automatically assume their champion sucks now, but not actually know the specifics. I think that is true. Remember the placebo effect?
That Riot have spoken
about. They pretend to...
I think what was the mistake? They said they nerfed Aurelia or Vlad or something, but then they didn't.
But they still saw the win rate drop.
What's really interesting? There was a thing that Freak said about how for every like 2 AD or 1 AD you remove of a champion, like you nerf base AD on a champion, its win rate drops by something ridiculous.
That's crazy.
And look, I think that it does kind of make sense because like base AD is a pretty big value.
Yeah, that's quite big. Yeah.
But I think at the same time there is an element of placebo effect going on. I'm like pretty certain that is the case. Now, this ties into one of my points about how if you don't have champion mastery, if you don't have a main, it's very hard to adapt to a patch, by the way, I found. Because think about it. You orient yourself, you have to experience a patch through a particular lens. Let's say, for example, you're the player that champ hops all over the place. And let's say you don't have a considerable amount of mastery on a given champion. You're going to come into a new patch. All these changes have happened, right? To all these champions and all these items. What do? Nothing has any bearing to you because you have nothing to orient yourself around because
it's just a load of information.
It's a load of information. It means nothing to you.
It means nothing. Versus if you're looking at it from the lens of a champion, it's like, I lane versus that champ and I struggle versus that, or that was easy. I'm going to focus on that patch
exactly
because and cut out everything else.
We don't. This is the weird thing. We don't experience the game through. It's very difficult to experience the game through our objective reality of like Nathan Mott playing League of Legends, or Coach Curtis going into game playing. We're experiencing the game through the champion's lens, right? You have to remember that.
Yes.
Like that is how you experience the game.
First.
It's not like Curtis loads onto the Rift or Nathan
and he's
loads
just like
onto the
this
Rift.
League of Legends player, and he's just like this coaching god, and he just has all this. He just knows.
Have all this knowledge about everything.
There's
no, it's
like
we are always attached to the game, and we view the game through a champion's lens. That is how you actually get good at the game, right? And so I think there's an inherent like advantage to that though, in the sense that it gives you it's like a building block to work off of. But if you don't have that structure, it's so hard to adapt to a patch. Now, going back to what we were mentioning before, right? You have these 1%ers, you have these 5%ers. Then you have these big, like let's say 15%ers, right? And these are things like objective timers, like or towers, or like, okay, Rift Herald changed completely. You know what I mean? Like they do matter, right? When Grubs got introduced into the game, Nathan, that was a pretty bloody Nathan. Come on,
yeah, of course.
That was pretty big.
Yeah, it was.
Like if you imagine you didn't read the patch,
I just think about the overreaction to the at the beginning of the season. Like it was just such a shit show at the beginning of the season. But yes, that's correct. Objectively, that is true. It did change the game.
Like you had to adapt.
Even when they went from the 5 to 6 minutes as well, that did have a big effect.
If you're a support player who wasn't wrapping their head around Grubs, you're at a massive disadvantage.
Yeah, the support's running there. Yeah, of course.
You have to run there. Yeah. You know? And so I think that at the end of the day...
Which is why they're called 15%ers right there.
15%ers. They change your entire way you view the game.
Yeah.
Right? Same with dragons, right? If dragons before, they were worth, nothing, right? And then when they introduced the soul, right? Ocean soul, that's huge. Again, that is massive. If they turned around, Nathan, and said, okay, we're nerfing Raptors, it's worth 50% less XP, 50% less gold. Well, what's going to happen?
Well, if they change the spawn time of Raptors, that will change so many champs.
That's what I'm saying.
And Kane and stuff, yeah.
These are 15%ers that will change pathing. It will change meta. It will change the flow of the game.
Absolutely.
Gank timers, invade timers, reset timers, everything. Right? So there's those. They're 15%ers, yeah? So you have you're going up the scale. I think most people don't struggle to wrap their head around the 15%ers, right? No. Most people can...
You'll hear that again from word of mouth. Someone, one of your friends, or, most people in communities for League a lot of the time, or they have some news, or again, they're in their programs. They'll hear about those 15%.
Exactly right.
And they'll learn pretty quick, because you remember, going back to the initial conversation, the reps happen real quick. So it's like, okay, I'm playing 3-4 games of support. Let's say I didn't know Grubs existed. Oh, interesting. The enemy support's not in lane. They're roaming to the Grubs at this 5 minutes. You'll adapt even without reading the patch notes. That's actually how I've done it a lot of the time.
Yeah, me too, actually.
Just I'm happy to run in and just sprint a couple of games, and I just adapt really and just learn really quickly.
Very practically, actually. Let's talk about how we respond to then patches. For me, going on to the next patch that comes out, I literally skim through. I will look at the things that affect my champion pool. I'll be I'll look at how, is there giant mechanic changes? No. Okay. What are if it's small number changes, I just pretend it doesn't exist. Now, if it happens to be down the line that I'm ASOL, I'm playing, say I'm an ASOL player, and then I'm oh, my mana's starting to really hurt you. I feel for me, very practically, I'm oh, okay, well, I will have that painful experience. I'll go into that game, I'll go, I'm okay, back to the drawing boards there. That's probably not the right hypothesis, and I'll make my adjustment. A lot of the time, I've got an incredibly simplistic, basic approach to patch notes, because that's not my strength. I can't reconcile what I see on paper versus the feel of the game. It just doesn't.
Yeah, I'm a feel of the game person.
Feel of the game, right?
Yep.
It's just so hard for me to read numbers. 5 damage on this, 3 movement speed here. I can't reconcile that. It just doesn't mean anything to me. I need to feel the patch.
Yep. 100%.
So yeah, I guess to TLDR that whole sequence, the average player is going to struggle to distinguish between a 1%er and 5%er. And I think that is one of the challenges that the average player has to face. And I guess that's the benefit of having a group of friends and following YouTubers, coaching our communities and things like that, for people to help people wrap their head around it, I guess. So I guess that's that. It's actually not what I thought would have been the takeaway from this section, but I think it actually makes sense.
Yep. Going back again to the foundation of this podcast, go to Champ Mastery.
Yeah.
Making sure that when you're reading patch notes, you're going to have way easier time viewing it from the lens of a champion. I think that's a good takeaway.
Now, one part of the article that we don't need to show here, but just very simply, is the return of Lethal Tempo, Nathan. Lethal Tempo was a very game-changing rune. It warped the game, right? Certain champions, the way the rune interacted with particular kits, whether it be Jax or Trundle or Yasuo or whatever, it was more than just additional stats. It literally made the champion
too good on certain champs.
Well, it literally warped the champion. Yeah. It made the champion be
insane. It was too good.
Yeah, exactly right. But it'd be difficult to balance because of that, right? It's difficult to balance because certain champions got attached to the rune itself and become connected with the rune. So they're reintroducing it. Now, I saw this interview. I think Hailfire linked it to me, and it was a Chinese broadcast interview between Froxon. I think it was a Froxon, some Chinese host of some show on the LPL or something, and one other writer. And then the Chinese broadcaster said, the Chinese community have been very vocal about how much they hated the removal of lethal tempo. And then Froxom said, I think it was meant to be some sort of publicity thing, I'm assuming, for the Chinese community. We're bringing back lethal tempo, blah, 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 right? And it really raised the question. Again, I'm putting back on my conspiracy theorist cap here for a second here. What percentage of this decision to bring back lethal tempo was Riot, again, feeling pressured that the league community wasn't, feeling pressured from the league community that they really wanted to have lethal tempo back versus them genuinely thinking it's a good idea. The balance of the game.
Yeah, the implications of the balance.
And so, look, I don't think we're going to have the answer to that question, but it does raise an interesting problem and how this is going to move forward. How is this moving forwards? There is this very interesting dynamic I've noticed between this kind of authoritative power that Riot have, where they can just come in and say, hey, everyone, this is what we're doing. This is why we're doing it. Suck it up, like it or leave it type thing. Versus, the whole, I guess, democratic kind of us as a community band together and petition, say, we want this or we want that. And you were wrong and bring back this. And Riot kind of, acquiescing and just basically saying, yes, all right, guys, we'll bring it back. Don't worry. That balance has fascinated me. Now they brought back lethal tempo. I don't know if that's for the better or, for good or bad. They have changed it. Maybe it's fine in its new current state. I get it. But what does this mean for the future of League of Legends? What else are they going to acquiesce on, or what else are they going to be like, all right, fine, we don't really want this in the game. We didn't think this was a good idea, but you guys really want it. You guys asked for it. Let's here you go, have it back. And the things that really scare me, I mean, we've had that whole argument or that discussion about duo queue and master plus.
Yep.
We've had the voice comms in solo queue.
We're
that's
heavily anti-voice comms, yeah.
The list goes on of these kind of controversial topics. What's next? Do you see where I'm coming from?
I see. So you said this could be a trend you're afraid of.
I mean, I don't know. I'm just raising this as a discussion point.
It's a challenge. I mean, the quote, with great power comes great responsibility. Right, do have a massive responsibility. I'm not too concerned. Always bringing it back to our philosophy of the game. League is league. The game, the principles that we teach. I mean, I can say this whole year, I don't think I've read a single patch note this entire year, and I'm just popping in just master tier GM games, just chilling, just might stuff up some things here and there, but I understand what's going wrong. The game hasn't really changed that much. I'm very confident that Riot can't change the game that much. Just a rune lethal tempo. Yeah, whatever. Have your rune.
Right.
I'm not too fast.
So you think that they've got some kind of line, invisible line that they've drawn that they know they can't cross?
You're not adding an extra person. It's not 6 versus 6.
Right.
The map's not turning into 4 lanes.
Right.
The game's not going to suddenly Baron spawns at 5 minutes.
Right.
The game, a MOBA's a MOBA, League is League.
Okay.
And people love the game. We love the game for what it is, and I think that Riot are pretty good at. They can add these things on, and I don't think it matters that much.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm just over exaggerating. I don't know. But the one I will just say, just very vocally, the thing that scares me is just the voice comms. And I don't want to open that can of worms today.
We've talked about that.
We've talked about that enough, but that's the thing that still scares me. That's the haunting thing at the back of my mind that I'm always just dreading. I just hope never comes.
Yeah, I 100% agree. It'll be interesting to see the adaptation. We talk about, the modern day toolkit of adapting to
what's it gonna look like if that does come into play? What is that gonna look like for the maybe there needs to be we need to do a whole thing on how to use and abuse voice comms and how to integrate voice comms into your gameplay. That would probably have to be a whole thing that we talk about on the BBC. That's another can of worms, Nathan. We'll have to tackle. Another thing we'll have to tackle.
I don't think they will. They've had many opportunities over the years to do it. I don't think they will. But you are right. Maybe this lethal tempo is a trend, but I don't think so. I think have your rune. It's not like the game was like, I'm just trying to think about, worlds metas and stuff like that. Lethal tempo champions, like the best players in the world figuring out metas and stuff. I wouldn't say that people were winning games because of lethal tempo.
No, ultimately, if a rune's in the game, everyone has access to the rune, right? So it doesn't really matter. Even if it does warp the meta, it doesn't really matter. It's an even playing field.
It's an even playing field. Exactly right.
Does that think that covers all the patch stuff, Nathan?
Yeah, there's just a bunch of other stuff in here. Quality of life improvements, item queuing.
I don't think that really is that overly that important.
Yeah. All right, next topic for today, Curtis. What have we got here?
Did you want to talk about your shorts thing?
Oh, yeah. So people might see from our YouTube, TikTok. We also have an Instagram now as well. We've been posting a lot of shorts. And shorts for a podcast like ours can be challenging to make shorts with our shorts editor, especially the shorts as well. They're going out to, not just BBCs. It's probably like 10, 20% of BBCs, but a lot of people that don't know Curtis and I and just league players in general. So we're really hitting a big general audience. And if you go see the comments on some of our shorts, especially specifically on TikTok and Instagram, it's a read. Now, this was one here. I'm actually from YouTube, YouTube Shorts. They're a bit better than the others because obviously the people that watch Broken by Concepts on YouTube, it'll trigger shorts as well for them, and they're mostly the listeners. But we still hit a general player base. So we recently did one here from our episode called "The Lonely Experience of Solo Queue." We did that I think last year, and we titled this one "Play Ranked Seriously or Don't Play at All." Now, obviously, we're going to have to, we probably talked about this topic for about 15, 20 minutes, but we've got a little, 30-second short of us basically saying that, right? So people read the titles and they like to comment. So yeah, the YouTube comments went a little bit wild. This whole conversation of like, it's just a game, you got to play for fun, and like, oh, I hate these 4 fun casual players in my games. So here's a comment. Completely disagree. Try to have fun in ranked. You'll get inters, trolls, AFKs, and overall bad teammates anyway. So if you try hard 100%, you will just get frustrated and burned because your team won't 100% try hard and pick their 20% win rate. Yeah, sorry. Play for fun and you'll get better over time if you don't play. You don't just turn your brain off and have fun. That's the best way to play League. So this guy disagreed and stuff. And there's other comments like this. Now, sort of that discussion and reiterating this discussion as well, the idea of play rank serious or don't play at all. Like what a big part of our podcast, Coach, is educate. What we really want to do is educate the player base. It's like, maybe your teammate's not actually in. Maybe they just had a really rough matchup. They completely just made a couple of end of review plays, and you can't blame them for that. Like, they've completely ruined the game. And just understand that's the end of review mistakes. Just understanding the mistakes from yourself and your teammates, we believe makes your league experience, your improvement experience, much better. So if you're going into the game, la-di-da-di-da, doing all my own thing, that's what I sort of mean when I'm saying sort of, play seriously, play intentional, be observant, then you are going to be that person that goes on Reddit, says, don't play League. Everyone's just shit. The game sucks. These are the people that, negatively impact the community. And that's sort of why we talked about this. I can't remember if it was my topic, but why it's important for the player base and why we think that ranked, serious competition, you got to play it seriously or you are going to have a miserable experience.
You know what's interesting, Nathan, is like with anything, with any endeavor, the more effort you put in, the more inherently, like, more emotion at play, the more...
Absolutely, yeah.
You're going to care more, right? If you're coming into a game and you're trying and you're really trying to get the win, whatever... In a way, you kind of have to be quite vulnerable in a way, right? You have to go into the game, trying roll, and you have to accept that some people aren't really going to be trying in that game, and you might bust your balls and lose.
Yep.
And that's going to suck. That is
Part
going
of
to
the game.
suck. And I think where a lot of people struggle is that they maybe muster up that motivation. I feel bad for this guy writing that comment, right? Because he's probably had that painful
He's
experience.
put all his all, and it's like, well, what's the point of me putting my all if I've just got this person here putting in 20%? Like, what's the point? That's life.
That's life, right? That is life. And there are going to be things out of your control. I think, again, this ties into the same bucket, falls into the same bucket, Nathan, where, you need to focus on what's in your control. And again, it sounds like a buzzword. It sounds like something out of some cheesy, shitty motivational video, but it's true. And League it mimics life in that way, where there are going to be many things out of your control. And if you focus on things out of your control, it's going to be miserable. And you have two choices, right? You could then complain and then check out and then be like, I don't want to engage in that. And that's fine. And that is a way. That is a defense mechanism. That is, I guess, a tool or a way to navigate that game. You can do that. I will say, if you don't have if you don't develop the toolkit of focusing on what's in your control, right? It actually does make sense to do that. It does make sense to play for fun, doesn't it? It actually does make sense.
It's a logical thing.
It's a very logical thing to do. If you're not able to kind of focus your attention on what's in your control, because what's the alternative? You're going in, you're trying your best, and you're focusing on the things out of your control. You're going to lose your mind.
Yeah, it's you got to break your keyboard, and then you've just lost $100. There's no logic to it.
There's no logic to it. So, like, in a way, it's like you either fully check out of the system or you fully check in, which ultimately that's the message, right? It's like you either take full. There's no in between in League. Actually, what we've realized, isn't there? You're heavily rewarded for taking max responsibility and max accountability, and a growth mindset. But you're also kind of in a way incentivized, or you're incentivized to go to the complete other side of the spectrum, which is check out, don't take any responsibility, blame pure externals, and then that way you protect your ego. So there's only two ways to feel good about yourself playing the game. They're the only two ways. If you're in the middle, right, where you're kind of trying but you're still blaming externals and stuff, you're screwed. You're gonna have a
You're still not gonna have a good experience.
You're not gonna have a good experience at all.
Yeah, it's interesting when you put it that way. And when the title of this one as well is like play rank seriously or don't play at all. People, if you control F fun on this, it pops up a lot, but that's not what we said in the title. It's not what we mean. You can have fun, embracing and taking full responsibility. We have so much fun doing that. It's way more fun. And people misconstrued the playing rank seriously with that means that I'm not having fun.
No. Yeah, exactly.
And the community is really bad at that. It's like try harding's like not fun. Remember that the worst take of solo queue, that Score Esports guy.
Yeah.
His perception of fun was playing with friends, having 80% win rates. That's not fun for us. That's not That's not a competitive game. That's a rank system that's corrupted.
Yeah, I mean, look, winning is fun, right? I mean, I think winning is fun. Yeah, like we want to win, but you're not going to win every game, right? So if the only reason you're playing League is because you want to win games, and yeah, I mean it can't be the only thing. It can't be. You have to enjoy the actual game itself, the playing of the game itself, the strategy, the expression, the execution. If you don't, then there's no point, right? Because you're going to lose a lot. That's just the system.
You're going to be confused. You're going to be angry, and you're going to blame the game.
You have to view League like a puzzle game. That's actually the most healthy way to view it. There's a bunch of puzzles and there's a bunch of solutions. You need to find the solutions and master those solutions and move on. That's the most healthy way to view League at a high level.
And then not just that, but that combined with then executing that over enough long-term period, because people are very good at just thinking of like the next game or this game and 5-10 games.
I heard something really interesting recently, Nathan, where we're in the public eye, right? We do this podcast every week, and a lot of the time we're just trying to push the envelope, right? We've been very vocal. We've been wrong about so many things on this podcast. We've spoken about how we never spoke about fun at the start, right? At the very start of our podcast, we would be very elitist in a way.
Serious process, discipline,
dominate your opponent. These are things that we don't necessarily believe in anymore. If someone wants to play a particular champion, even though it's off meta, we encourage that now. You know what I mean? It's like, if that's what is fun for you, if that's the way you want to go about your League journey, that's what brings you enjoyment. You want to play, let's say you want to get really good at Yasuo and Silver, go for it. Yeah. I'm not going to sit here on my pedestal and say, don't do it.
Just don't come and complain.
Exactly, don't
Just
come
be
and
aware. Just be understanding the journey you're taking.
But my point is
but initially it wasn't like
that. That was
yeah.
not our
No,
take,
no,
right?
no.
We and also we were not. If someone said, "Oh, I wanted to," swap my Champool, we would have been very critical.
Champool cycling was something we
Champool
developed
cycling.
over years.
We were wrong at many stages in isolation.
Well, wrong's a strong word, Curtis. I don't think we were wrong. We were just... Those ideas do work. Like playing Yasuo in silver, probably a bad idea, right?
Well, not really. Again, in the grand maybe it is better for that person in terms of
their experience of the game.
And
okay, you could use that word wrong.
Well, this is why I want to say wrong, because it's a lot more complicated than that. We've realized it's a lot more nuanced.
It's just more complicated.
It's more complicated. Right. Like, you can't have these general pieces of advice. No. They just don't apply to everyone. Like, we're a lot more loose in the way we share our messages, and we're clearer. I agree. I think we're clearer. I think that's a way better way of putting it, right? But if you were to go back, someone who listens now, they could cherry pick something that we said on episode 25 of the Broken by Concept. Be like, these guys have no idea what they're talking about. They were off on this one or whatever. And we were, admittedly, there were probably other things that we were off on, and I know that for a fact. We were being off on some things. That part of being in the public eye doing like a podcast like this is like, we're bound to fuck up. We're bound to be wrong about shit, or not be correct.
We talk so much about the game.
We talk so much.
There's so much content. Yeah.
And I feel as though a part of the skill that we've had to develop is confidence that, and I guess we've had to develop this belief that we're just trying to find the truth.
That's right. The intention is there. That's
the intention's there, right?
Having a crack is a huge mantra that I've always talked about, and what we have, just having a crack.
We've evolved this not only on the podcast, but even within our coaching programs as coaches. Like, the way we give advice and how we run our coaching sessions has changed. And I feel as though with these shorts, it doesn't really help our cause, right? Because I think as well, it kind of, when you have these shorts, everything is taken out of context in a way. And some of them are very useful and very clear, but shorts as a medium don't really, it's good for reach and people kind of discovering us, but I feel as though people get very riled up at this. And I understand that. And I think that what I'm trying to say in a long-winded way is that, like, something that we need to be aware of, Nathan, is that we're going to be wrong about shit, but we need to be wrong about things to push the envelope.
Absolutely.
And I don't want to have a podcast where we just say the same things every week because that's what people agree with. And so there's a concept called audience capture that I heard that I found absolutely fascinating. Whereas a content creator or someone that has an audience, someone that's in the public eye, is kind of positively reinforced to make the same or say the same things or make the same sort of content because that's what got them clicks and views in the first place. So we could sit here and we can talk all day long about the same. We do talk about certain things, but we could not be pushing the envelope in terms of a lot of our ideas. We could be sitting in our comfort zone saying everything that everyone else wants to hear, and that might get us clicks. But at the end of the day, we wouldn't be pushing our craft. And so I think that, we need to be willing to be wrong about things and look like an idiot sometimes. And I think some of these shorts kind of freeze in time, us looking like an idiot. But I've kind of embraced that.
Absolutely. Fully
embraced. If someone get pissed off at it, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's the consequences of, doing what we're doing right now. And if we didn't do this, if we weren't saying things with conviction and admitting they were wrong, the podcast wouldn't evolve.
Maybe consequences, I don't like that word. It's a requirement. I guess it's a consequence, but it's just what we have to do.
Yeah, it's what we have to do. It's part of the recipe.
I think it's a lot of fun. I enjoy it. And I love that people are getting involved. I love these comments and people having strong opinions about the game, because everyone, even though a lot of these comments, people can be like, I hate the game. It's like, well, you're engaging on a league TikTok. There's probably some aspect of like, the game means something to you for enough for you to comment this. Maybe not. Maybe I have no idea who these people are and they just like to just type their opinions. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that as well when I read a lot of these comments, Nathan, is that I try to like pass it through a filter. I don't take I don't take any of these comments at face value, by the way.
Absolutely not.
None of these, like all these comments, is that what it really means is something else. If someone says, like the one you were reading before about,
Here's another one. Bullshit. Really, you can play ranks for fun and climb because it's fun. You don't need to take a game seriously ever if you don't want to. Just because you aren't taking something seriously doesn't mean you aren't trying to win. It's a fucking game.
Right. And so if let's dissect that one, right? From what's his name, Mr. John here, right?
Josh.
What he's saying is that, he's probably a casual player. He doesn't actually treat League with respect, right? And it's not a serious hobby for him. So for him, it's an unwinding activity, I'm assuming. This is an interpretation of this comment. I could be completely wrong, but my interpretation of this would be League's a casual hobby for him. He likes playing League on the side. It's something that he does. Maybe he has other hobbies. Maybe he does MMA. Maybe he does boxing. Maybe whatever the hell it is. League's an outlet for him. He could be an old school player that has had results just by playing League for
fun
8 years for fun.
Yep.
And he's like
Build
slowly
up the
seeing
muscle
progress
memory
and
stuff,
maybe he's an old school gamer.
Yep.
So in his mind, he's got these two things. Well, like I find League kind of relaxing. I don't really try that hard and I still win games. I've played the game for quite a while. I feel like I'm actually kind of slowly getting better. This doesn't kind of fit with my view of reality. Therefore they're wrong. Right. And so in a way, a lot of these people aren't overly introspective about what they say. This is just an emotional response when it makes sense in their view of reality. But the average person doesn't have the kind of the cognitive, the toolkit to be able to unpack what most people are saying. And I also feel like I actually respect what he says because in a way, you need to have a bit of you need to stress test people's ideas. If you just went on and saw a random shot with some idiot Aussies on two armchairs, your default response probably should be they're probably bullshit and unless proven otherwise. You know what I mean? Like it's probably better to start in a way where
start there
then work your way up being like, oh, these guys probably know what they're talking about. Because if you trusted everyone, you're just going to get led on a trillion different, rabbit holes.
This is true. I haven't thought of it that way.
So it actually kind of makes sense why people are negative at the start until they warm up to us.
You just assume that people are wrong until
proven otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually as a toolkit that makes sense. So yeah, my point being is that like when you read these comments, it's I don't really take it at face value.
All a bit of fun. All right, Curtis. Moving on to our community Skool post. If you want to join, we got a link in the description. It is free to join. This one here comes from Alen. The title of this one is How Important is the Desire to Gap Your Counterpart versus Just Doing Your Job? I think I've heard both in the BBC universe, just do your job and take in souls. I can't remember which BBC episodes tackle this to review, but the intensity of these two are very different. You can do your job with making the life of your jungler as easy as possible, playing for the team, even express your best self level of play. But I don't have that desire to take souls and gap the other guy. Is this a mental mistake / flaw? In a boxing ring or any martial art, is it good to practice your techniques, fundamentals, versus wanting to rip the other guy's head off? P.S. Would appreciate if anyone remembers which BBC episodes are related to this. So you responded to this, Curtis. You said, I actually mentioned in one of my BBC episodes that I don't necessarily agree with the taking souls mindset anymore. For the overwhelming majority of the League community, simply doing your job and executing the win con / what your champ wants to do is the more sustainable and less mentally taxing way to win games in solo queue. Once you start to get a higher up, Master Plus, and you have quite a developed mental stack and understanding of the game, then the whole dominating an opponent becomes a lot more feasible. Here's another take that I've got on this, Curtis, as well. Let's say boxing or MMA or 1v1 sports. I would even say taking soldiers from David Goggins can't hurt me. 1v1 versus himself. That's...
taking souls was actually...
Yeah, no, it was. The instructors
instructor
of the Navy SEAL
training.
But that's still like a 1 versus 1 type mentality, right? League is obviously a team game and there's a lot of variables. So, let's say you can just go hard in like boxing for you can just choose... I'm just going to put all my energy in these next couple of shots and stuff, but for League, there's constant downtimes and it's impossible to, in League, because there's like lull states and resets and you can't, having that mindset all the time it's not going to work. If you sort of see what
I
I'm
see what you mean.
saying.
So to correct,
It's much easier to do that in a 1v1 scenario.
or in a scenario where you can keep up the pressure or something, is what you're saying.
Yeah, but there's no letting up.
Right.
The gas.
So let's take, if you're taking boxing, for example, no one else is going to prevent you from impacting the fight, right? It's just because it's just you two.
Yeah.
So no one can come in and like, it's not like, so in League, you're a laner, but then jugglers are going to intervene or supports are going to intervene. So no matter how much you want to dominate your opponent, sometimes you simply can't because of other things out of your control.
Exactly
is
right.
what you're saying.
Yes.
Right. Yeah, no, I definitely think there's an element of that. I think, and this is where I think taking souls, you need to be very, like, what taking souls means in other endeavors, you need to take it in context. Like taking souls, like if you think about what taking souls mean, I think we had this conversation before, but like, if you were to describe what taking someone's soul is the equivalent of as a jungler, if you were to take the opposing jungler's soul, that would be like, I'm assuming, tracking all their ganks, pinging exactly where they're going to go, counter ganking,
yeah.
like always being like one step ahead, knowing exactly what they're going to do. So that doesn't necessarily mean you're killing them all the time,
No.
but you're just one step ahead and you're always making the better quality decision, right? So in a way, you are in your own mind taking their soul, but
really you're doing your job.
objectively you're kind of just
It's
doing
like
your job.
Bill Walsh, John Wooden, they're not talking about taking souls in team sports, right? They're about doing your job.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's an interesting. So yeah, I guess the whole team component of League definitely muddies the waters a little bit there. I think. Look, I'm going to stand by what I said though. I think taking souls and all of these like high level, it's a high level approach. You can't even really begin to consider that there is a person on the other side of the screen until later on in your journey. You don't have the mental capacity to even, like, okay, let's say, Nathan, you've been very vocal about this. You could read a laner and you could understand their psychology. You could literally look at a laner's movement.
Yep, I know exactly what
And
they're
you know
do.
what their mindset is,
Yeah.
you know, probably how they're feeling, if they're stressed, if they're overwhelmed. You could read not just the champion, but you're looking at the player psychology there, right?
Their mental stack.
That you can feel if you're in the zone, you're playing your best League of Legends, you're popping off. You know when people are stressed or angry or tilted or frustrated or like, you know, if they're likely going to overextend. You could probably read people, right? At like a personal level, right? Am I right or wrong?
Well, look, the game's so structured where, yeah, I mean, there's elements. I wouldn't say I rely on that to like win games. I
I don't want to say you
structure.
rely on it, but is there an element? Would you say there's an element where you could read a player's how they feel in a game?
As a jungler, I think as a laner, you can do that way easier.
Okay.
Because you can feel how they're responding to your trade patterns and stuff like that. As a jungler, I don't think so.
Okay. So you're saying you don't read anything at a player level.
At a player level, unless I know them. Like I'm playing against certain players and I played against them a lot and we've sort of had a bit of a back and forth. Yeah, I mean, because maybe, I mean, I haven't done that in so long because I haven't pushed myself and played in challenger games for a while, this year specifically. But I would say when I was pushing, yeah, if playing against certain players, there would be a feel to the game.
Okay.
And I would be playing against a person, yeah.
Okay.
Rather than just a structure of like, this jungler's going to do this, he's going to path this way. He
Right.
just has to
Yeah.
do this.
Well, as a jungler, it's probably a lot less connected,
Yeah.
right? As a laner, I could feel it
100%.
very clearly.
Because you're
Right?
trading all the time.
You're feeling-
you,
yeah.
You feel every cooldown, basically.
But my point is that if I didn't have all of these other skills developed, my ability to read the player on the other side.
Yeah, that's
of
like the advanced. It's like mind game stuff.
That's
like
mega
challenger.
advanced.
Yeah,
like
it is.
I would have to have such an expanded mental, like so much champ mastery,
Yeah.
complete knowledge over what I need to do and how I'm doing it and why I'm doing it, before I even remotely get to that. So taking souls, if you actually dissect what we got from the book, it's nothing about. It's about literally demoralizing someone and reading how they're responding to what you're doing. So in David Goggins' case, right, it was him not giving up, knew that it would piss that guy off and completely make him give up, kind of demoralize the drill sergeant or whatever it was, right? In League, you see that in laners where if you're really advanced and you're dominating your opponent, they will just kind of check out and stop contesting prio because they just can't dodge your abilities and they can't hit an ability on you. That's the equivalent or an example of the equivalent of taking souls. Now, Is that applicable to the majority of the league player base? No. That's an extremely advanced thing. So when I initially brought up that topic and I got obsessed about that, I was delusional because I didn't separate or take myself into account how good I was at the game.
You were in a little bubble
I
of
was in a
like
bubble.
Coach Curtis playing Challenger and Os
Yeah,
against
just
the same
ridiculous.
players all the time.
It's not fair to impose that onto anyone else. So for the sake of all intents and purposes, most people should pretend that concept doesn't even exist.
Yeah, I agree.
And just focus on doing your job. What's the next objective? What's my role in the composition? What's the win con, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I agree.
Right. It's just not even, it's not practical.
Yeah, and going to hear how important is the desire to gap your counterpart. From jungle perspective, the gapping becomes it's a pure byproduct of just beautiful decision making. It sort of just happens naturally. And sometimes because I can't, if I go into the game with the expectation to gap my opponent and I don't, because it's not going to be possible because my laners are going to die in certain situations and they're going to get maybe every objective, maybe everything just clicks for them. I can't have that mindset because I'll get emotional and I'll check out and I'll just instantly give up.
It's very
And
hard.
I have to be doing my mindset. What's the most optimal thing for me to do every time? Because the most optimal thing a lot of the time in League is to do nothing. The optimal thing to do in a boxing match, MMA, you can't not do nothing.
And
right?
when ego gets involved, when you make it personal, I found it incredibly difficult to play my best League of Legends.
Yeah,
I'm
100,
terrible
yeah,
at that.
yeah.
Now, some people are different, right? Some people they can make it personal and perform.
Remember Cupcake did that against us
Yes.
when he was on Legacy
Yep.
and us Shern. He hated us before he joined our team, right?
Yep.
Legacy, they hated. So that was personal, those matches. And they
played
did.
well.
They did play well.
But that's rare.
Rare, yeah.
Very rare.
Cupcake's
Is an outlier.
is an outlier.
But yeah, I think nothing else to be said, really. I think it covers it.
All right, mailbag time, Curtis. Away we go. Welcome back for Nathan's mailbag. Jingle, jingle, jingle song. Alrighty then. Our first question here comes from Antonio. Limit testing champions. Hello, coaches. So I've been thinking a lot about limit testing. I've been listening to the podcast for the last 3 years, and I was wondering if I could get a more in-depth explanation of limit testing. From what I recall, when you guys talk about limit testing, you guys go over having a high risk tolerance in fights to see what the results are. You are also advocates of diversifying build paths as well. Both pieces of advice are given to help us develop intuition of our champs to be able to identify good and bad feelings and situations without spending part of the mental stack. I really do love the advice because it's something I've used in all my learning endeavors outside of League. Music, art, soccer, sales, combat sports, prior to discovering Broken by Concept. But I was wondering if maybe there may be other ways to limit test as well. I currently play on and in bronze with a roughly 60% win rate. In order to limit test champ further, I have played him in mid, ADC, and jungle. My thought process is that I can develop the intuition against more champs because I am increasing my sample size against other champions that normally don't exist in my lane. With those larger sample sizes, I say feel because I totally could be delusional and experiencing confirmation bias, that I have a better understanding of what I'm looking for in my team fights because I see more engagement opportunities. I also feel that I'm identifying losing situations faster because I realize a setup is no longer in my or my team's favor because of my additional laning experiences. Is this process legitimate, or am I just overcooking and burning down my kitchen and there are better additional ways to limit test a champion? Thank you for all the episodes and deep dives, and don't forget to floss.
That's a great question. Okay. There's a lot to unpack here. I think he's done the first half of the email, I think he's done a very good job of kind of like breaking down limit testing.
Yeah.
I think he's done a very, very good job. There's one thing, and is it Antonio? Antonio, that I would encourage you to think about, right? The way you want to think about limit testing is that you want to create, I guess, somewhat replicable hypotheses that you can test. Okay. So when you play a champion in one role, you're kind of fixing one half of the equation, right? So think about it. I'm just going to simplify it. Top on at level 6 into this, what happens? So as you play more games of top on, you're only changing the second half of the equation. You're not changing the top on at level 6. You're changing the whatever it is you're doing that thing to. You're ulting, say, all-inning someone at level 6. When you're playing on among other roles, you're actually changing both sides of the equation. You're not now only testing top on at level 6, you're changing jungle on at level 6, which means the circumstances change a lot. You're going to have maybe less items, differing items. It's going to be later in the game. Other people are going to be at a different power level. The circumstances are going to be different. You're changing a lot of variables. So this is why when people say, oh, I want to play my champion in both mid and bot or mid and top, I typically recommend against that because it can actually mess with the underlying muscle memory that is developed because you're changing too many parts of the equation. You don't know what you're exactly limit testing. Now, in saying that, yes, I'm not going to say it's a completely futile thing to do because you can kind of limit test particular combos and look, you're going to be learning something. But the reason I don't recommend it is because I think it adds a lot more complications to your journey, and I think that the negatives outweigh the benefits. So I would 100% recommend playing the champion one role only, and then that way your limit testing you'll calibrate a lot more effectively.
Yes. In short, is this process legitimate, or am I overcooking and burning down the kitchen? Yes, I think you're overcooking a bit here. It sounds cool in theory, but what we want you to be limit testing is in that role against that champion in that matchup.
Exactly right.
And if you're changing that every 2 seconds, you're actually just hitting the reset button on the limit test every time. It's like, okay, I'm limit testing, going all in with my combo against small to mid, but I'm not versing that in top probably ever again. So you're not actually learning the champion. You're not actually limit testing, really. You're just hitting the reset button constantly.
Exactly. My big advice for limit testing, though, for most people is you're basically just trying to figure out anything that you're confused with. It's like, oh, I don't know if I can kill this person, or I don't know if I can survive this. I don't know if I win this trade. That, they're all versions of limit testing. But again, there are so many things to limit test in League, aren't there? You're limit testing your durability. You're limit testing your damage output. You're limit testing the other person's durability, the other person's damage output. There are so many levels to limit testing. You're limit testing on specific items and what items do. Very simply, if anything confuses you, do it. And the more specific you can get, and you can, let's say you want to limit test a specific thing, then that's great. Now, you don't always have that luxury. Sometimes you're just in a limit testing phase. You want to limit test everything. Anything within reason, do it. The last thing I'll say, the trap that people tend to fall into is that they limit test things that they know are likely not going to work anyway. It's like, I'm 0-0 here. This guy's about 3/4 HP under tower. Can I solo kill this guy under tower? It's like, you probably know that's not going to work. That sounds a little bit ridiculous. It's just not within reason. So as long as it's within reason, then it's a good limit test.
Great. I have nothing more to add. Next one here comes from Georgio. This is like our second Italian name in a row.
Antonio and Georgio.
People probably don't know this, but I'm half Italian. It might be hard to see. I got way more on my dad's side than my mum's side. But yes, I am half Italian. And Nathan's not a very Italian name either. And same with Mott. That's not that side of the family. Okay. Hey, Nathan and Curtis. Before I get into it, here's my OPGG. Here's linked to his OPGG. We can look at that later. Whoops. For some background on me, I've been playing since Season 3. 95% of the time casually with friends. I occasionally played solo queue up until silver or gold, but never anything serious. At the beginning of season 13, I decided to take rank seriously, which coincidentally is also around the time I found your podcast. I decided to main ADC as that's the most fun for me, and I hit Emerald for the first time in season 13 split 2 on my own, purely following the broken by concept process that you guys preach about. Now, in splits 1 and 2 of season 14, I have been hovering between Emerald 2 and Emerald 3 and decided to get some coaching to try and push for Diamond. After my first session, I dropped from Emerald 2 to Emerald 4. And after my second session, I'm currently in Plat 2 and about to hit Plat 3. My win rate has dropped from 53% before coaching to 46% after coaching. From 2 coaching sessions, I made improvements on wave management, recall timings, camera control, trading, mid-game macro, etc. But I am very confused how my rank is dropping. If I'm theoretically playing better, why is my rank dropping? Am I playing worse? Is this something to do with my mental stack being rewired? I'm very confused as to what is going on and was wondering if you guys as coaches have seen this happen with your own students as well. So the title of this one, I forgot to say, was Losing Rank After Getting Coached.
What do you think, Nathan?
Now, this can happen. I wouldn't say it's common, though. What I've observed is they realize, so there's a couple of ways that people can go with coaching sessions. They realize how much they don't know about the game, and they lose a lot of confidence. They're like, wow, I don't deserve my rank. I am doing so much wrong, I suck. And then there's sort of I'd say another side of things where, yeah, their mental stack is overwhelmed. They were very good at sort of autopiloting at this level, and now they have to be more intentional about things. They're not used to being intentional about things. Their mental stack is overwhelmed. And you might be improving on little things, but what League is improving and climbing is things clicking. Things need to click all together from a coach, from things, getting the reps in. So, you didn't mention here how many games, the sample size or anything. So that would have been important to note. It could be like, if you're dropping that much, like, is that just one gigantic loss streak? What does that look like? Like, we don't even really know the time zone period.
Go to the tier graph, like the LP graph.
Yeah, then we can get an idea. Tier graph, here we go.
And do monthly.
Monthly, here we go.
Okay. So okay. So he could have peaked E2, you know what I mean? Like he might not have been a genuine Emerald 2 player.
That's right. That's
another thing as well. Like
yeah.
he might have been on a lucky streak, things aligned, and maybe he was actually always like an Emerald 4 player. And so
this is his ELO range.
Yeah, it's his ELO range. He's an Emerald 4 player, plus minus 200 LP, fluctuate P2 to E2. That is a lot to admittedly. That is a pretty big LP range. It can happen though, depending on the player. Some players do have quite a wide LP range. That's just another factor there.
There's obviously the other factor is that maybe the coach just put you in the direction of focusing on all the wrong things. But he said that he improved on a lot of skills. And again, I don't know the time period, but I feel like if he was listed out all those, there's levels of how good you got at them, So like it's a lot of general stuff here, Curtis. Like wave management, recall timings, camera control, trading, mid-game macro. That's the entire game. So are you telling me that you think you got them all, we just tick the box? Like, okay, challenger level there, challenger level there, challenger level there. Like, I feel like we don't even know how much we improved on these and if it's actually having that much impact on our games as well.
I think Nathan's raised so many good points here. There's a lot to reflect on those. I think you're spot on. Maybe the coach gave you wrong learning objectives. Okay, another one that Nathan didn't mention was maybe the coach got you to experience or play the lanes in a different way, right? Say you're an AD carry and maybe you were playing very conservatively before and you were just not interacting as much. You're just like valuing your life, just focusing on your farm. But now the AD carry, maybe the coach said, well, you're playing too defensive. You need to step up a little bit more. You need to, time your trades more with last hits. And so your mental stack's getting overwhelmed. But not only is your mental stack more overwhelmed, maybe you're putting yourself in more precarious positions, right? And without having sophisticated threat assessment, you're actually going to maybe inherently die more, right? That is a very real thing. So typically, let's say, for example, I give a learning objective to someone, let's say an Orianna player, and I realize that they're playing very defensive. And I might say, well, you need to be posturing more aggressively, getting in their face more, making them sweat for last hits. At the same time, what is that going to mean? They're going to be more overextended. They need to be more simultaneously more aware of the jungler. Otherwise, they're going to die to more ganks. Maybe you haven't yet developed the muscle memory to execute upon what the coach said such that you're getting punished for it. So sometimes, like Nathan said before, it takes time to develop habits and the things that you've learned before it to really ramp up or click within your gameplay. The other thing as well is that's a lot of things to work on. I don't know what the time span was and how like close those sessions were together. Like if you're adjusting things like camera panning, that's a very mentally overwhelming thing. Like camera control can take months.
Months, yeah.
Right? And then you said wave management and mid game. I mean, that's a lot there to unpack. So maybe you're focusing on too many learning objectives in game, and that's what's causing your mental stack to be overwhelmed. You're focusing on too many things rather than just being present and reviewing things in the post game. A lot of coaches don't actually set out of game learning objectives. They'll tell you to focus on things in game, and then the client focuses on all these things in game, and then they just kind of mentally explode. So there's many reasons. So to answer your question at a high level, I wouldn't say it's common, like Nathan said. I would say especially for us, probably because we're more experienced with giving like learning objectives and understanding how to not let someone self-sabotage like that. But it does happen, and I have seen it before. And I'm not going to lie, it's happened with me as well with clients.
It exists.
It does exist, but it's not overly common.
So yeah, I hope that gives you some things to think about. Again, it's just impossible for
It's hard for us to know.
3 sentences to know exactly. Like we could be like, oh, how great would it be?
It can be many things.
How great it would be. It's like he gave us 3 sentences and we were able to say, this is exactly why you.
But hopefully from this answer, you can reflect more. There's a lot we gave you to think about, and then hopefully that will give you some context to maybe do some, make the adjustments, or maybe not. Just get more reps in. Who knows?
Hope that helps.
I hope it helps. Yeah.
All right, our next question here comes from Lino. The title of this email is League's Hidden Training Mechanic. Hey, BBC Podcast. I had an interesting shower thought recently, and it led me to believe that the League ranking system has a hidden way of making players naturally better. So let's take a hypothetical average player. Let's say they've played a decent number of games in a given season, and they have reached a rank that exactly resembles their skill level. By this, I mean they are playing to their full potential, not tilting, having decent climbing discipline, but are getting right around a 50% win rate. The way the ladder works, an account like that would likely have an MMR right around 100 to 200 LP above their rank, meaning they will experience LP gains even with an exact 50% win rate. And this is where the mechanic comes in. Much like progressive overload in fitness allows a person to see significant strength gains by slightly increasing their weights over time, this natural passive climb of a couple hundred LP means that this player who is otherwise stuck has a chance to play against slightly better players and maybe see improvement in their own game. Just a thought, although I feel like it's something I've definitely experienced in my own climbs. Am I onto something here?
So to summarize that, what he said was that the rank system will eventually place you versus better players. And because you're versing better players, you will learn new things kind of coincidentally, and then that will make you a better player.
Yeah. And is it a hidden training mechanic? So my understanding is that how the system works anyway, right? Like the system is going to put you in those harder games, and if you're able to win those games where your team is overall lower MMR, that's going to boost up your MMR more so.
Yeah, I don't necessarily know I don't think it works like he's outlined it. I think it's more like the latter, where what you said, where it's like Riot are constantly testing your account. They'll put you in hard games, easy games, and average games. And depending on how you perform in each of those games, it's going to calibrate your MMR and where you should be in the rank system. Now, because it is calibrating and not just putting you versus the same caliber of players, then yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe there is an element of that kind of progressive overload-esque thing happening whereby you're facing players that like, oh wow, I've never faced a player that did that before. And that's causing you to maybe think about the game, or intuitively or subconsciously causing you to think about the game in a slightly different way, leading to you to behavior change. Maybe that is part of the way the learning works in these rank systems. but it's so hard to tell because it's so conflated with so many other variables. Like just
So many
simply
other
getting
variables.
reps in,
Yeah.
right? You're going to get better at the game, or you know, some player will have a skill set that is different to the skill set that you have. Like you might be a very strategic player and think big picture about the game, and then you verse a mechanically, expressive player. And so just versing that player and his skill set he's going to do very well into you in the lane, and that's going to get you thinking about the game in a different way, and vice versa. And he learns off you and you learn off him. So it's so many things at play.
So many variables. I would even flip it as well. You could verse someone that is lower rank, lower MMR, let's say a one trick, and learn a bunch from them, right? League is not like this static. It's like this person here is higher rank, which means they're better than me in every single game. Some games, this guy just has the perfect comp. Everything just clicks together.
Oh, I love that, Nathan.
It's just not possible. Yeah, and that's a very easy way of thinking. Like even this question, writing that in, isn't that a sexy way of like improving? You know how people think that you can play on like a challenger account, you'll just magically get better and stuff like that. That's just not how League works.
I think you touch on such an important point, Nathan. Like people automatically assume that if one person is higher ranked, they're just the better holistic player.
Better holistic, that's right.
And and it's so much more complicated than that. And look, it is a good general heuristic, right? No shit. If someone's high rank, over a large sample size of games, that they are going to perform better and win more games.
They're better at ranked than you are.
Yeah, they're better at ranked than you are over a large sample size of games.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you wouldn't be able to beat them in certain games. Or maybe your specific skill set matches up well against that person. Right? You might have an Emerald 4 player that has a champion pool and a skill set that just does well into a particular Emerald 2 player. And that can happen. And that means, but for that Emerald 2 player, they're not always versing Emerald 4 players like you. They're versing a wide spectrum of Emerald 4 players.
I can think of one example here. Let's say someone that's just really thought about, studied punishing roaming mid laners, and they just ignore it all. They're not the Emerald 4 player that like tries to follow and compensate with their team. They just get huge experience of gold lead, and then that person just fails a couple of roams, and then that person just dominates those type of games.
And that the person that roams will always beat the players that follow.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly right.
And then, you can flip it as well. Let's say you're the roaming player. No, sorry, you're just like you're very bad at like mage versus mage, right? Well, let's say you always just slowly drop CS and stuff up some trades, and you just can't beat that Emerald 2 mage player. They're just better at mages than you. You're just trying to beat someone in your same skill set. So that's how quickly it can flip.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And there are players that are really good at simply setting mid, farming and scaling and not compensating and being really, really patient. And some people get really frustrated at that. They panic. They just... Their
narrative is they're getting outscaled.
Yeah. And there are some people that just don't even care. It's like, cool, I'm happy to handshake, and then they'll just beat them in the mid game.
Yeah.
So that's the beauty of League, isn't it? That's the beauty of League. There are so many ways to win the game. And for the majority of the League climb, it's gonna be very hard to there's going to be so many major differences in skills, strengths and weaknesses. When you start to get to the higher end, it kind of evens out a lot more. You know what I mean? Like everyone in Grandmaster is good at majority of the game.
That's
like
right.
You can't really have gaping holes in your gameplay anymore. No. But yes, for the majority of the climb, that is the case. So I like the way he's thinking. I like the question. I think it's just more complicated, more nuanced than that.
Which is our answer to so many things.
Yeah. Which is good. That's what I like about this podcast. We want people to embrace the complexity of League.
It's the skill set of the thinking, the problem solving.
Yes.
That's what we love.
Yes.
We don't even care about the answers.
No.
It's the intention, the intensity, getting good at something.
Being curious.
And the journey's ugly. It would be great if we had this little cookie cutter, follow this. I reckon it would be really boring if that was the case.
Exactly right.
All right, that's it for our podcast then. Good work, guys. Keep improving 3 blocks process. Play rank seriously, but have fun. See you guys next week.